Hello, everybody. Quickly, let me check about this. Let me check this website. How's everybody doing? I think I'm trying to make let me check this website. How's everybody doing? I think I'm trying to make okay. Maybe I will have. Let me check this website. How's everybody doing? I think I'm. Okay, sorry. I'm trying to figure out this group chat. For whatever reason, I have a hard time with the chat every week. And available, like seriously, hey. Okay, every week I try to do this chat and it doesn't work. So hopefully you guys are able to get on it today. I hope everybody's having a good week. Thank you so much for the feedback that I've had so far. I had a really good review today and I was all emotional because sometimes I do these, and not just this work, but work that I do in the community with Raising Readers. And sometimes you're like, oh my God, am I doing enough? Or am I having enough of an impact? Or any of those things. Or you worry because you can't ever really scale the work as much as you would like to, because I would want, you know, to have tons of viewers, but not just viewers. I would want people to just duplicate the work and for it to grow at a faster rate than it is, just because I want us all to win. Of course, that's just my heart. And sometimes, you know, I'm affected by it not growing at the rate that I want it to grow. And so whenever I get positive feedback, it really touches me and it lets me know that we're on the right track, we're getting it done. So another thing, I want to make an announcement that we're going to be in New City. I've posted about it in Minnesota, and that's a great work that you guys can support financially if you would like, either through me or directly through the organization. And we're going to be sharing not just the Raising Readers DVD, but also my book, Ringing the Alarm, and doing which talks about positive parenting. It talks about breastfeeding. It talks about nutrition. It talks about a lot of different things. And so we're getting that information to parents in that community on a more scaled way. And so that's really good. We are going to continue the work there. And I'm very excited because we talked about it months ago and it's finally kind of rolling out, and we will be there. We've already ordered all the materials, the DVD, over 200 DVDs for those parents, books, shirts. We're getting that work done. So thank you guys for the people who have donated to that organization or to Raising Readers, because this is all donations based. Two more announcements. So the book, the best way to order the book is by emailing me at urbanbailout@gmail.com. The same thing with the DVD guide. And if you want to do that, just send me an email and I will send you an invoice. You can also do it on Amazon.com. The reason that I like people to order directly to me is because I get like $2 more, but also because I'll know that you ordered it, and then I'll have a record of it. And then if you ever need to ask me any questions or anything like that, we've already communicated and exchanged information. So that's great. Also, people have asked me how to get a copy of that. Here's the thing. Once you ask me for a invoice, it's very important that you pay the invoice, because I have to purchase the books and the DVDs ahead of time, and I purchase them and then they don't get paid out because the person doesn't pay the invoice. So please, if you would like a book and or a DVD and you request an invoice, make sure that you pay the invoice so I can send it to you, but so that I'm not stuck. Right now I have 5 straggling DVDs and books that I have paid for and ordered because they were requested, and those people didn't pay the invoice. And I understand that things come up, but just please understand that this is a labor of love and that these materials cost money. So I've been asked that, how to get a copy of the DVD. The other thing that people have asked me is what exactly is on the guide, and it's very easy. This is the model. I wanted to create a tool that showed parents whose children are not yet in kindergarten, what are the 7 skills that children need to develop so that they can be ready to read and or reading by the time that they're in kindergarten, before they're 5. So the first part of the DVD is me explaining why this has to become a community agenda. So it's not just people with parents, it's not just parents with children, but really this is a community thing. So the first 2 parts, I talk about the school to prison pipeline. I also explain why it's so important to develop these skills before the age of 5. So there's a little bit of teaching you guys how the brain is wired in early childhood education, why it makes a difference in getting these skills in before the age of 5. So we talk about that. That's part 1. Part 2 is basically the 7 skills that you have to develop. And the idea and how I structured it is showing you the skill, and then after I kind of show you the skill, then there's, for most of them, I'll have examples of my son's progression through that skill. And so you'll have that. So you have the introduction, then you have each step, then like an example, like a real world kind of example with me and my son. And if you develop these 7 skills, your child would have an early literacy foundation. And I promise you that children that have these skills go on to be readers. It's just that a lot of our children do not have all of these skills, and you need every single one. So please, when you watch the DVD, the idea is for you to really understand that skill and incorporate it into your daily life. And then you have the YouTube channel, which has a ton of examples on those skills, like different things that you can do to develop those skills. And then on top of that, if there's a particular skill that you need additional support in, then you can contact me and I will incorporate them into either videos on the YouTube that I will send you a link to, or I would incorporate them into these webinars. So that's the idea of the DVD and how the DVD is structured. So those questions have been answered. Really quickly, today we're going to talk about listening skills, which are very, very important. But in reading aloud is a part of that, and I wanted to go over really quickly. This is the book that I'm reading this month with my son. It's called 21 Balloons. And I will tell you that it was a surprise. I went to the Goodwill looking for a particular book. A teacher said, that's a really good book. We just read it in class. She recommended it, so I picked it up. I bought it. Let me tell you, my son and I are having so much fun reading this book. It really is good. And we're only like 3 chapters in, but like last time we were reading it and he almost was like so devastated because we had to stop. We're like 4 chapters in. It's really good and it has great vocabulary. So again, 21 balloons. So reading aloud, which I talk about probably every webinar, is extremely important. I always want to remind you that listening comprehension is greater than reading comprehension. And so if you want to further your children's vocabulary and the quality of their writing and their reading level, one of the best things that you can do for your children is to make sure that you are reading to them a more advanced book than the level that they're reading at. So they're reading at 2nd grade, you want to find like a 5th grade classic, and that's the book that you want to read to your children. So if you're doing like a 30-minute exercise or a 40-minute exercise and going over the other stuff, still make sure that you have your 15 minutes where you are reading to them. The books that we've read over the last maybe 4 months have been Narnia. We've read 2 of those chronicles. We did Where the Reverend Grows, which is my favorite book. It was one of my first books that anyone ever read to me aloud, and it changed my life, and I'm very emotionally tied to it, and he loved it. He really wanted me to read it twice. We're starting on this book. There's a lot of good books that you can read. Charlotte's Web is really good. There's a lot of books that you can read that are for boys and girls, and they're mixed ages, so you have multiple children that can all kind of sit in on it. And the most important thing is for you to know that it exposes children to proper grammar, sentence structure, vocabulary. You'll get to pick up from your children's eyes, from their responses. If they're picking up on the vocabulary, they will ask you. Listen, when I read Where the Reverend Grows, we went over so many vocabulary words because it's an old book, so the time is different. Then it's about hunting, it's about country living. My son knows nothing of any of those things, so it was dated. There were a lot of things that he just didn't know, and what it did, it just expanded his vocabulary and his experiences. And that's what we want, because we can read, but the way we can read in terms of sounding words and decoding, but if we don't understand the information, if we don't understand the vocabulary that we're reading, and if we don't have background information, we don't have historical information, context information, then we don't understand what we're reading, and that's where reading comprehension is affected. And so it's very important that we're creating rich experiences and exposing our children to more complex text, and not just making them read, but making sure that we're reading to them. So this is the book that we're reading that I highly recommend. So those are the administrative things. I won't make this too long. Today I'm going to talk about listening skills, and then I'll talk a little bit about phonemic awareness. And that's all that we'll do today, because that's kind of its own category. So when we talk about reading early literacy with preschool children, we always talk about developing the ear. So if you look at a lot of preschool programs, and definitely I cover it in Raising Readers, the literacy guide, is that you want to develop the ear. This is one of the reasons that we sing to children in preschool, that we play clapping games in preschool, that we play rhyming games in preschool. We do all of those things. And what that is about is this thing called phonemic awareness, developing the ear, being able to develop the ear and being able to differentiate sounds within words. And it's critical to literacy. It's critical to being able to read and read well and read with fluency. Here's the thing. A lot of our children are not, before the age of 5, are not spending enough time going over these skills. So a lot of our children before the age of 5 are not learning nursery rhymes. They're not learning nursery songs. They're not clapping words out. They're not playing those little classic games that in the old days used to really develop the ear. A lot of our parents, myself included, because before I had my son, really I did not know a lot of these things. We forget to do those things. We really think that those songs, those poems, those clapping out words, all of those things are about just fun. They're about being cute, like our little baby knowing the Itsy Bitsy Spider we just think is cute. It's not. It's not about cuteness. Really is about processing. So for example, the Itsy Bitsy Spider is a little preschool song, early, even like a toddler song, even before that. And you just think it's a song, but it's not, because now, like when you're doing the finger, right? You're doing the fingers, it's about processing, okay? So it's about rhymes, because the words rhyme. It's also about memory, because you have to memorize the song. And then at the same time, you have to move your hands a particular way. So when you're doing all of these things, the brain is engaged in a lot of areas that later on, if you fast forward to what a good reader is, an advanced reader, a person who has high literacy skills, they need to be able to hear out words. They need to be able to be analytical. They need to be able to process a lot of information at the same time. They need have strong memories. So they need all of those skills. And here you are doing them on a very basic level. You're singing a song. That's one part of the brain. You're moving your hands. That's another part of the brain. You're remembering to move your hands at the same time that you're saying the words. That's another skill in the brain. So you're building all of these skills at the same time. That's an example of why it's so important to know finger games and to do nursery rhymes and preschool songs, because it engages a lot of areas in the brain that deal with literacy at a very basic level. And from there, you start to build. So a lot of our children are not spending time going over these skills. On top of that, now for the first generation, first kind of generation of children, you have children that are from very early, from the time that they're 18 months, 20 months, exposed to headphones, right? And tablets. What these things do is it makes our ears be very focused on listening to that one thing. And when we don't use them, our brains have to learn to kind of turn off certain sounds and turn on certain other sounds, right? So we can focus on one particular thing and we can tune out background information. Even that is lost when you're using this. And this is the first generation of children that at a very early age has access to headphones from a lot of the time. And we're at a restaurant and the child has it on with the tablet. And we are in the car and the child has it on with whatever electronic device. So what that is doing with our children is that it is not developing their ears in an organic way. And it's not developing, it's not just your ear here, but really just the way that their brain works. It's not developing in an organic way, the way that we've always developed our ears in life. And so first and foremost, we do have to realize that we are handicapping our children through technology. And we then see it reflected when they struggle once they get to kindergarten, first grade, second grade. So for our babies, particularly if they're already struggling, some of it has to do with not spending enough time getting those listening skills developed. The other thing is their ears developing in an unnatural way because they were exposed to a technology that has never been, that we've never had in history before. And so what ends up happening is we have to develop it even more. So we have to make sure that we are giving a priority to developing the ear because it did not happen in a natural way. And in the old days, say in kindergarten, for example, a lot of time was spent on word segmentation, sound segmentation, rhyming. A lot of time was spent doing that because it is very, very critical, and I'll tell you why in a second. It is very, very critical to literacy and to be able to process information, processing text, and also processing sounds in order to have fluency and reading comprehension. Having a developed ear is very important for that. But because of Common Core, because of standardization, because of all these other things, less and less and less and less time is given to these oral exercises and developing the ear. So what happens? Here we have a generation of children who are exposed to things like this, very young, who are not singing enough, they're not clapping enough, they're not learning enough nursery rhymes. They're not getting these skills before the age of 5. And then we're putting them in a school system that's also not spending time in kindergarten really developing the ear. Fast forward to to first grade and second grade, again, just because you don't develop it doesn't mean that it stops being important. So then we start to get complex text and we have a problem surface. And it's really because there's an area that never was developed. So when we're doing, if our children are already struggling, this is an area that you might be like, "Hey, Nikolai, like really listening games, listening exercises, oral exercises. I just want my son to read. I want him to read books. I want her to, write. I want sight words. What are you doing with these games? Why is this important? Like, this is not important." It is. One of the reasons your child is struggling is because it was never important in his or her life. So now we have to make it important because it's missing. It's one of their things, one of the blocks in their foundation that is missing, and that's why we have the problem. So if you've joined us a little bit late, just go back and then you'll understand why it's so important that you have this. So why is it so important that you have listening comprehension and why you have a developed ear? Before I tell you that, if you can think of movies, for example, and you have somebody like reading a letter, right? You know how they always have somebody narrating kind of in the background? You're like, "Dear John, if you find this letter, da 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 da." Like, that narration is something, the reason they put it in movies, not only because, we can't read the letter, but if they put the camera over the actor, you could actually read the letter. But when we read, whether you realize it or not, you do have that internal voice. Your inner ear is actually activated and you are listening to yourself as you read. Some of us do it more than others, but here's what you'll find, particularly if you have complex text and you're having a little bit of an issue understanding it, if it's challenging you, if you pay close attention, you will actually do it. So think about, or next time that you read a complex text, try to catch yourself, because we tend to do it a lot of the time when we have difficulty or we're going through something that's a little more complex or that we need to place close attention to. Automatically that inner voice will kick in, and we actually read with sound inside our brains. We actually hear what we're reading. And so that's a skill that you have. So having that ear clearly helps you when you're having a challenge. And so that's one of the reasons that it's so important that you develop that inner ear, and just the way to develop it on the inside is to develop it on the outside. So that's one of the reasons why. The other thing is because sometimes words are very similar. They look very similar, but just different, like infamous, right? Famous and infamous, for example. They look very similar. They're different words altogether. So I'm trying to think of other words really quickly on the spot, but you have to be able to, I should have written more examples, but sometimes just like words just have like little nuances and differences that just one little sound will throw the definition off. And so what you want to do is to make sure that you do have that ear that is very, very developed so that it can help you spot changes in the text, and for you to be able to pick up on the meaning. What we're talking about when you're doing fluent reading of the meaning, so that it doesn't affect reading comprehension. So a developed ear, fluency, reading comprehension, vocabulary, it all works together. So that's why it's so important to not just focus on phonics, when we're reading and when we're trying to develop our children and trying to help them become better readers because they're struggling. We can't just do phonics. because it's phonics, it's the ear, it's vocabulary, it's fluency, it's rhythm, it's all of these things at once. And so that's just so important. So I did take some notes because I know I can ramble on about all of these things, but small points. And then as I'm reading them, you can think about what an ideal person is that has high literacy skills. And when I'm reading these 4 points to you, think about how important it is to be able to do these things as you get to be as you get to be an adult. So if you're reading a legal document, a financial document, just text in a book that's not written, that's written at college level, etc., you know that it's very, very important to be able to have these skills. And so this is why it's so important for us to develop that ear. One is that as you're reading, you have to, in order to decode particularly new words, you have to have the ability to select what sounds you're going to focus on and what you're going to code and decode, right? You also have to memorize those sounds and patterns in language as you're reading. You have to mentally manipulate them. Again, we're talking about new text. When you're reading a complex text or something that is new to you, you're using all of the skills that you have in your literacy toolbox at the same time, right? So that's when you're dealing with complex text. Well, for your child who's a new reader, an emergent reader, or a struggling reader, all of it is complex text. So when you think about helping your child, you want to put yourself in the position and of you reading a very dense, complex text. When you're reading very dense, complex text, that feeling and that process that you're going through is exactly what your child is going through every time, because what they're reading is complex, dense text to them. So kind of put yourself in the position of reading through an investment policy, or reading through a financial statement, or reading through a thick medical book, and you have to read it a few times. Those skills that you kind of draw on, those are the same skills that your child is drawing on, because that's complex and dense to them. So the ability to select the sounds that you're hearing, again, that inner voice is going to help you. Memorizing those sounds, mentally accessing those sounds, manipulating them, manipulating the info, and then being able to pull it all together and act on the information, meaning actually decode, code, and get the meaning from the text. So the brain is doing all of those things at the same time, and having a developed ear is how you are able to do those things. So it's very important that we develop the ear. If your child is not 5 yet, or if you have a child that's not 5 or 6 yet, please be very careful with the headphones and the volume and the X's access to technology and to television and radio and all of those things at high volumes, because you want to protect your child's ear. So with that being said, how we do it, how we develop the ear is by playing games and going through oral exercises. So first, the first one, of course, is rhyming. And so you want to practice rhyming words with your children, even if they're older, and you can just get more complex with it. So a younger child, you might go cap, nap, lap, right? Very simple words. But as the child gets older, you might do like nation, station, older, more complex words. A lot of our children like rap, a lot of our children like hip hop, so you can like do bars. My son and I do it, and we're both equally terrible. But you can kind of do bars, or just like poems, or try to rap if you're good at that. Or you can do poems, or you can just do kind of road, pink, ink, stink, think, link. So do kind of those, kind of like go down the list. But it's really good to have rhyming games, because it kind of gets you into that swing and listening to words. So that's one of those things that you can do. And it's really good to, work on rhyming words on all these oral games in between skills, right? So you might work on phonics for a little bit, and then you might do an oral ear game, listening game, and then you go on to practicing writing, and then you do one of these games, and then you do reading aloud. So in between the skills, you can work on this one because these are oral exercises and they tend to be not so threatening. So it's really good. These are also really good things because you can work on them without material. And so, for example, if you have a struggling reader and you know that you're gonna have to work on phonics and then reading aloud when you get home, well, you can on the way home in the car already work on one of these exercises, and so you don't have to take time out to do it when you're sitting down and doing your tutorial or your intervention. So it's also very time effective, and it's a skill that you can work on even on the phone. So if you have a parent who is not home, or if you, like, let's say you work the night shift and your children are at home, so you're not able to like go over all of their reading stuff, you can call them on the phone and you can go over these games. Or if you don't live with your child, this is an area that you can help your children in, because the mom could do this thing and then the dad can do, the mom can do like the written stuff, and then the dad, for example, who doesn't live in the home, can do the oral games on the phone. So this is kind of one of those things that we have to be creative and, you know, distribute the time, but never neglect the skill. So that's one of them, the rhyming. The other is paying special attention. This game right here will let you practice, develop your ear, and also think and also process. So processing is important because you have to process the information quickly and come up with an answer. That's a skill that when we go to testing and just reading comprehension, we have to read and then answer questions, right? We have to read and gather meaning. That's processing. Read and remember the beginning at the end. That's processing. And so this simple game helps you do that. And it's something as simple as you might say 4 words and one that doesn't match. So snap, 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 cap. Cap, which one doesn't go? You might do words that start with you. So you'll do one and then they'll do one, and you do one and they'll do one, or you might do 4, where you say the same word 3 times and you will change one. So you can say snap, cap, snap, snap. Again, cap, when did I say differently? In the middle, in the second one. So again, you say the same word 3 times. You're gonna say 4 words. Say the same word 3 times. Start with 3. 2 of them will be the same. One will be different. So snap, snap, cap, right? Okay, which one was the one that was different? It was cap. When did I say it? At the end. Cap, snap, snap. Okay, which one was different? You're going to change the words. I'm just using it as an example. Which one was different? The first cap in the beginning. So first you do it with 3, then you might do it with 4 to make it more challenging. And at the beginning, when you start doing the game, you're going to change it at the beginning, so the first one or the last one. But once the child understands the game, then you might do one where you change it the second time or the third one in the middle. And you want them to say what was the different word and where did you change it. Easy enough? Okay, the other thing is that you can say, what words, let's do sound games. Let's think of as many words as we can that start with the sound. So horse, happy, hay, right? So hibiscus, right? So you're going to think of all the words that start with the sound. That's going to practice, but also practice memory, processing, recalling, vocabulary. So you're going to do all of that in an oral game, in a listening game. And you'll listen to one and they'll listen to that's another, taking turns, right? So that's another skill set. Like paying attention to what the other person's saying so you don't repeat it. All of that is active listening and practicing your sounds and active processing. So that's another really good one that I like. Another one that's similar to the first one is when you do, so 2 words with the beginning game, with the beginning sound. So horse, hay, floor, right? So obviously floor, it has a different beginning sound. And you can do horse, hay, happy floor. Okay, which one did not start with and where was it? So it's kind of like the first one that I mentioned, but that one is about not ending games, but ending sounds, but beginning sounds. And you can make it more complex by skipping, so that the ones that you're switching are in the middle of the sequence. So that it's really good. I'm telling you, these games, you might think it's nothing, but they're huge. Think about all of the skills that you're building. It's the listening skill, the building the inner ear, which is a tool that gets built in when we're challenged. Again, it's processing, it's memory, it's critical thinking, all of these with these simple games. So that's one. This is another one that I like, tapping. So you come up with some kind of pattern, and then you have your child. So you come up with a pattern and let them duplicate that pattern. And then they can come up with one and you duplicate it, because they'll have to listen to see if you're doing it right. So echo matching is important. You can also hum it if you're not like tone deaf like me. And so you can be, you can do it out loud, or you can do it with tapping. I do it with tapping because I sound horrible, but pattern and having them match it, right? The other thing, if they have like a favorite song, you guys can figure out, so this is a good one. You can have a few songs, you write them down on a little index card, write a couple of them down, and then you pick one out, and the person has to hum it. The person has to do a pattern, right? They gotta sound out the song, and then you have to guess what song that is. That's also an active listening one. The other thing that you can do is sit in a room and close your eyes and have that child think about, for like 5 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever, think about, you can start with 3 and work up to 10, and that's also going to help meditative skills and being able to focus. So that is also going to help with test taking and with reading comprehension and just the ability to focus on complex text. So that's another good one, where your child is sitting down and is listening to all of the sounds that they can hear. So it can be something that's dripping, it can be the furnace going, it could be your brother in the other room. You have to think about all the sounds that you are listening, that you're hearing. And then after the 5 minutes, after the timer goes off, you'll talk about all of the sounds that you heard. This is a great sound. This is a great game that you can also do, like, let's say you're at the grocery store, or let's say you're handling like a little business or paying a bill or doing something in a public place. Be like, okay, here's the sound game. While I do this, while I'm taking this call, or while I'm paying this bill, I want you to sit right here and think about, listen to all the sounds around you. And then when you get to the car, or when you get home, you have to talk about the sounds that they heard. Really being able to develop that ear and make it work is important. So like environmental sounds are important. A classic game is Simon Says. That's a perfect example of a listening game. It's a listening and a movement game. So how you trick the child, right, is Simon says this, Simon says that. But then when you say the action and you don't say Simon says, the person moves, they've lost, because they have to actively listen for the command Simon says. That is a perfect listening game. So when you have the children over on a Friday night, or you have their cousins over, or you have whatever, play Simon Says. So some of it is not just doing this stuff just when you're going over your tutoring or your intervention, but incorporating all of these skills at the grocery store, when you're paying, when the kids are over, play a rhyming game. I know when the kids come to my house, I always make us do like a rhyming game. I'll start saying something and we just have to rhyme. I like to doing let me give you an example. So I will start a sentence and then they have to kind of finish it. So if I might say, looking at the sea from the top of they would say tree. So see tree, right? So I might say, Johnny took a nap on his mother's, rhyming word is lap. So it makes them think of a word, that's vocabulary development, and at the same time, they have to listen to what I'm saying because it's like a little riddle, and at the same time, they have to come up with a rhyming word. So you can get more advanced with these. And again, those are all processing. So you have a child, if you have a child right now that is struggling to read, ask yourself this, or if you have a child that's struggling to read, and then you start doing these exercises and you realize doing these exercises is a little bit of a challenge for you, is a little bit of a challenge for him or her, then you know that the reason that is a challenge is because the skill was never developed. So it's an important skill for literacy. It's an important skill for reading comprehension. It's an important skill for processing. It's an important skill for when you're approaching a challenging text because you need that inner ear. So yes, if you start doing these exercises and they're a challenge for you, then you have identified an area where there's a gap or there's a hole in their foundation. That's why they're a struggling reader. That's one of the reasons, because they don't have this area developed. And now we can develop it with these games. So you can do kind of those rhyming games again, where you do the beginning of the sentence and then kind of give them a riddle, kind of like a clue, and then they fill it out. Again, Johnny took a nap on his mother's lap, right? That's kind of one. Two more games that I'll give you. Okay, this one's good. So you come up with a sequence of numbers and you might repeat one twice, or you can do the same thing with letters. And again, that's active listening and will help you identify particular things. So you might say KMTRMAF. I said M twice. You might say 1, 5, 15, 5, 12. I said 5 twice. So come up with a sequence of numbers or come up with a sequence of letters and say them, and they have to tell you which one you said twice. It might seem simple, guys, but again, it's about developing the ear and it's about developing processing skills, which is very, very important for fluency and for very, very important for reading comprehension. It's very, very important when we're approaching complex, difficult, dense text. These are things we have to have in our toolbox. And if you find yourself, again, going through these exercises and you see that your child is struggling with them, that's for you, that means that you have to develop that skill, because clearly that child did not spend time doing it. And a lot of the times when I tell people to do this, they're like, I never did that. Okay, well, if you never did that, now we know why we have to do it. It's going to be missing. If you never develop it, it's going to be missing. And if it's missing, then your child might be struggling to read. So all we have to do now is develop that ear. So patterns, again, you can do it with numbers, you can do it with letters. The last one that I'm going to give you, again, this is going to increase processing, vocabulary development, and developing the ear all at once. You're going to come up with, orally, you're going to come up with, let's change one vowel in this word, and it turns into another word. So, pin. Change a vowel, it turns into a writing tool. Pen. Right? The word not. You change a vowel and turns into a fishing tool, net. So have words where if you change one vowel, it turns into another word. And have them, and you can give them like a little bit of a clue. So that again is going to be processing, word development, vocabulary development, and ear development. And to make it more challenging and fun, what you can do is you can actually write those out on an index card, and you can take turns. Like put the index cards in a jar and make it like a game. So, and you can time it too. So whoever can get the most, it's almost like those games, shows on TV where, you know, you have a partner and you're guessing words in a time setting. It's very similar. And so come up with words that if you change one vowel, there'll be something else, and you can even have a clue. That will help developing the ear. It's going to help vocabulary. It's going to help processing. Those are all words that all skills that when you have a struggling reader, chances are they don't have that skill. And that's going to become an obstacle when they go to read new text, and when they go to test, and when they go to reading comprehension. So I'm going to leave it at that. I hope that this helps. I'm telling you, this is one of the areas where I have the parents spend the least amount of time, and where teachers spend the least amount of time, because in schools, unfortunately, this is something that's really good to do one-on-one or in small groups. And a lot of teachers don't have the flexibility to spend time one-on-one with children or in small groups. So it gets left out. The other thing is that because it's oral, it's hard to measure. And so because they have to do everything so standardized and they have to test everything, it's hard to measure oral exercises, and they just dismiss it. They don't do it. And so what ends up happening is if they're not doing it in school and you're not doing it at home, the skill is not developed, and then the child can't develop it. Oh, one more, very important, God. And then I'll let you go, is just traditional word segmentation. You don't understand how many times I work with even a fifth grader, and they don't really know how to segment a word. So couch, one, right? Declaration, right? It's just breaking the words into chunks. Here's the thing. When you are decoding a difficult word or a new word, one of the ways that you're going to do it is you're going to get a feel of the sounds in that word. Another thing is that when you have, in the English language, something like silent E's at the end, adding a silent E at the end, one of the rules is if you don't have a vowel in the last syllable, then you're just going to add a silent E because you need a vowel in every syllable. Well, if a child doesn't know what a syllable is and how to segment a word into syllables, then you're going to have an issue with whether or not they can even apply that rule, and that's going to affect their spelling, or whether or not they're able to decode. So another thing that you want to develop and make sure that your children are really, really good at doing is clapping those words out, sounding those words out in chunks. So do that, and then also what sounds are inside the word cup, up, right? What are the sounds inside the word chair, ch, three, right? Make sure that your child is able to really, you can take any word. You can take the same word, declaration, and really segment each sound that's in that word. Individual sounds and then individual syllables, the chunks. Your child has to be really, really good at being able to pull those sounds out. Now, if your child is having a hard time pulling those sounds out, boom, you've identified a problem. So these sound games and listening games and thinking games are very important, but at the same time, it's very important for us to be masters at sounding out words. Listen, I'm an avid reader. When I'm reading, I have to sound words are. It's for a new word. And it's my familiarity with other words and kind of the feel of words and being able to pull sounds out that is going to let me decode a new word. The same thing with your child. So it's very important to spend time clopping out words and word chunks, syllables, and also the individual words, individual sounds in that word. You have to get really good at that. I mean, if you don't get really good at that, your children will struggle for life. So I'm going to get to phonics really, really soon, but make sure that your children are able to pull sounds out in chunks and individual sounds and words. It sounds so basic, but you will be surprised. Once you sit down with your child and start going through this exercise, you will be surprised at the fact that your child does not master this skill. And that's not your fault. That's not that child's fault. That's not the school's fault. This is a whole system, and we're all getting it wrong. And we have to just make sure that once we have identified the problem, we address it with absolute no blame and no judgment. But do it tonight. Do it tomorrow. While you're making breakfast, take a few words and pull them out. Pull the chunks out, the syllables, and the individual sounds. If you start doing that every day and you do it with new and complex words and you start doing it every day all the time, your child will get so good at it. And his or her reading will improve. The fluency will improve. I'm telling you. So that is huge. I can't believe I almost forgot. That is a huge thing that we need to get really good at doing. Then from there, you're going to go to the rhyming. Then for them, you're going to go through all these different games that I have given you on this webinar. So now with that, I'm letting you go. Thank you for joining me. And as always, hire me, donate, tell people about this, order books, have people follow the account, anything that we can do to further the work. That's what we're here for. And together, we're going to raise readers. Bye, guys.